Hey everyone, welcome back to Building Jam, and today we're talking about our most recent release, which is the Jam for Customer Support product. We have the whole team here. We're going to go through, what it was like to really build this product and the difficulties that came behind what we have now live today.
I think our biggest challenge was probably the point where we realized we would have to restructure our entire event messaging system. Maybe not restructure the entire piece, but basically we had done some prototype work just to check, will we be able to use IndexedDB or local storage for passing events between the host page iframe? We basically would have like a customer install our script snippet on their website, and then that script would create an iframe, and then that iframe would send messages to our recorder tab, which would basically record the video of that first tab that had the bug. And so console logs and network events were needed to be sent from this host page over to our recording page. And we thought we could use IndexedDB or local storage for that. And we did a little bit of prototyping. This was way earlier on. The prototyping wasn't perfect. I think it didn't take into account that storage partitioning was in effect. And so when we prototyped with separate subdomains, but the top level website on each side was the same. And so storage partitioning didn't take effect there. And so things worked in the prototype. And then when we ran this on staging and we had a separate domain and we were testing it out, event capture just wasn't working. And so I remember kind of like frantically trying to debug what is going on, we're supposed to have this working, it's broken. Yeah. I pinged Tony, our head of engineering, in the middle of the night. I was just like, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but this is my summary of the problem. This is what I think a couple of solutions that we can take are, and then we talked about it the next day as basically, I think Maya probably remembers that better than I do, of we thought it was working, but now it's not working. We eventually did get that all sorted out and all good. But I think for about 24 hours there, things were pretty hectic.
The problem is that we were testing everything on our own domains. And then when we went to actually use this on other domains as it was intended, it didn't work because of browser domain restrictions. And we had considered that, but when we tried this with different domains, they weren't different enough, basically. And so the information that we were storing was just not. We were able to store data and then not able to retrieve the data that we stored because the browser was restricting us. Just to back up for a second, I think what's really fun or interesting about building this kind of product is that we're doing things that the web platform was not really designed or intended to do, but it's still very useful, right? As opposed to doing something the web platform isn't supposed to do and is kind of yucky or scummy. We're not doing that. We're building tools that really help people. And so I think that's what is interesting about this. It's a little bit like navigating an obstacle course or something, because there's all these security restrictions and other restrictions in place for good reasons, right? But they can impede us, and so this a big part. The name of the game is to just figure out another way.
And is it so? What ended up being the way that we worked around some of these restrictions?
Yeah, so for storage, for example, we basically, our problem was we have this session that's going on a host website. A user is browsing the host website and the user has events. And we want some way of associating these events with the same user having another tab that is browsing our Jam recorder page, basically, which is doing the video recording. We want some way of associating these two and getting the events across. And so the easiest approach for us to implement quickly was basically using third-party cookies and a WebSocket. So both sides, cookies were the last remaining piece where browsers had been implementing things like storage partitioning. So This wouldn't work for storage, but cookies have been around for a lot longer. And so with cookies, browsers do have partitioned cookies, but third-party cookies still work on Chrome. And so what that means is we can still create a request from our embedded iframe on one side and from our embedded iframe on the other side, and not worry about the cookies that get assigned to those request responses being partitioned by the top level, like the website that they're iframed in. And so on Safari, this doesn't work. On Incognito, this doesn't work. But on Chrome specifically, these cookies that the cookies that are set in our requests are shared between both iframes here. And so we can create a request, we can make a request, we can have a cookie set on it, and then we can have we can basically create a WebSocket connection to, in our case, a Cloudflare worker, and then pipe events across through that WebSocket from one tab to the WebSocket back to the other tab. And so that's our solution today. We would like to do it locally, but just because of these browser restrictions, we can't have it be entirely local.
Yeah, the first version of this that we were talking about a moment ago that we realized isn't going to work was to store this data in a database inside the browser. It's called IndexedDB. Browsers ship with it by default. And so what we did to overcome this problem was essentially invented what you might call an event relay system, where when we find out about console logs and network requests and so forth, we send those out to a relay service, and then on the Recorder app, we listen to the event relay service. And the way that we connect those two ends of that pipe, if you will, is, as Cyrus said, is with cookies. So that's how we know which side you're on, who you are on either side of the pipe, basically.
Like, Chris, I'd love to hear more about the design graveyard.
Yeah, should we take a look?
Let's do it.
Yeah, we went through a ton of design iterations, and I'll just bring up the sidebar. Here's our working file for the project. There's actually a dedicated graveyard for all these different pieces of the experience. I would say we did the most amount of iteration actually on onboarding, which is kind of interesting and maybe not what you would expect. So here we're just kind of mapping out the steps of someone coming from Intercom and going through the process of authorizing the app, it taking them back to Jam, authorizing the account. And then this first version, we were thinking more like typical SaaS patterns of there's a new feature that gets announced, and maybe you show that in a modal and you say, here's this new thing that we have, see how it works. And there's a kind of 1, 2, 3 step flow where you can see some of the major features, and we kind of explain it to you all here in context. We moved away from this direction because it didn't feel special enough, or like it was properly representing that this is kind of an entirely new product. It's not just a new feature. And it felt kind of small in relationship to what it should be. We had flows like this where we're going to take the user from Intercom and do the onboarding steps on a kind of dedicated tab where maybe we have a co-branded logo. This element here is lovingly, maybe partially lovingly referred to as the Purple Mountain. And glad to say it did not survive in the final design iteration. But
what is the Purple Mountain thing?
It's a great question. It's a graphic element that's been used in the Jam brand for a couple of years now. I think we're starting to move away from it, but it's these swoopy lines of color that kind of oversect with each other. Yeah, internally called the Purple Mountain. Sometimes it looks more like a piece of spaghetti or something, and other times it looks more mountainous. But
so the question was, do you keep these big blobs behind the onboarding, or do you take them away? Do you just move past them in the brand, right?
Yeah, I mean, specifically with this, it's like, yeah, is this even a part of the graphic language we want to keep? But I think at this stage we were just thinking about, okay, if it's not a smaller like modal experience on top of the current Jam platform, how do we make it feel a bit more visually interesting and again, like worthy of having its own page? I'll just show one more and then we can compare it to the version that shipped. This is like one iteration before the final version, where we actually had quite a few steps that were really like hand-holding users through this. Like not only the part where you connect Intercom to Jam, but also teaching users how to do it. And one challenge that is maybe like a little bit unique to this product is there's two different audiences to speak to, right? It's like the person doing this configuration, and then that person might then teach their agents how to use it, right? So we were struggling in making that communication really clear, not knowing exactly who the audience would be, because we also know we have a lot of support teams of one who are installing it, but also they themselves are actually on support chats and are using it. So in this version, we tried to make that delineation a little bit clear, saying stuff like, okay, now that it's been installed, when customers report an issue, agents request a screen recording, trying to create these really short headlines that people can scan, and then having maybe some subtext below, some graphics on the side here that kind of like represent each thing that we're talking about. And again, this is kind of a wireframe in a way, just to make sure we understand all the steps.
And five feels like a lot here, right?
Yeah.
Was that your feeling too, that it's just too much onboarding, right?
Yeah. It started out fewer, and then we were like, oh, we also really need to communicate this thing because it's critical to get set up. But of course, when we looked at all of that in totality, it definitely felt like too much.
Yeah, but fortunately we have Ian to make us amazing videos. So we can tell our customers all kinds of stuff in our videos.
That's funny. Yeah, let me give you the 9-part series, how it works in the video.
And so the shipped version ended up being actually like a little bit of a hybrid of all things we had explored before, but really like pieced together for the first time, where there is a little bit of this stepped flow, but we're condensing some of the steps and communicating all that in a single screen, but breaking up into like, different aspects of what to expect, what will happen, how to use it. And then the step of inviting agents to make it really clear that if you want to get your support agents started to use it, there's like this is how you do that. But trying to make it really easy for the person setting it up to share this with their team, for their team to get started. That's kind of a critical ingredient. And then, of course, like in Intercom, there's this helpful, once you install an app and you go back to the app listing in Intercom, they have this getting started guide. And that's also another place where we're doing some onboarding.
Maya, I'm curious about the rollout and talking with users and like how basically all the conversation shaped like the product that we have today. Can you share more about this and your experience with that?
For sure. I think at the beginning, when we had like those early access users, I think the biggest piece of feedback was how to make the recording, end user recording and submission flow very simple and straightforward. And if we go to Figma, I know that there were a bunch of like crazy amount of iterations on how to make that super simple. And because the product is basically an integration with Intercom and we use Intercom as our help desk, we could internally dogfood it with our customers. So that was very helpful. And we could also ask them like if there was something that was maybe not clear in the flow or something like that. But I think getting that, for example, in that part of the project, that period, getting the submission flow really easy was a key point. So when user records their screen, what happens after they stop the recording? So how do they know where to go and submit the recording? So making that step very easy was key. We had so we had feedback from our customers, and then as we were using it along the way, we were iterating. So we were adding some notifications in the communication between the user and the agent. So we were adding notifications when a user basically is done recording, when they start submitting the recording, so when the recording is uploading, so that agent gets notified when that happens, so they can, without even like having to ask their customers, what are you doing now? Are you done recording or whatever? We were doing that basically in intercom for them by adding these notifications.
And because the design for that recorder experience, because it was always meant to be so dead simple for the user who's recording it, the speed of like iteration we were able to do was super fast, because often it would be like, just change the text, and it like the prompt to get started recording is literally, are you ready to start recording? Here's the big green button to continue. And that's kind of like the design principles guiding that whole like the recorder experience. And so like doing changes were almost like, sometimes there would be like actual like design in Figma and like flowing things out, but other times it would just be like hopping on with Cyrus and be like, let's look at this live and make these changes and kind of feel it out in real time.
So I guess as we wrap here, I'm wondering if there are more funny stories or other things that came up throughout the process that we'd be remiss not to include or share.
I mean, I will never forget the cat. Like,
I think I actually missed that. Can you fill me in?
Oscar, one of the engineers on the project, he was testing the product. He was using intercom to test different flows. And as an agent, he had a cat avatar on intercom. And when you open a little intercom widget as a customer to send a message on Jam, you would see all the active agents. And one of the active agents, like the most active agent, was this cat. And that was really funny. I think Danny noticed that and was like, what is going on? Who is this? So we got rid of the cat, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any like funny anecdotes like that, but I do remember one that was like very interesting to me as an engineer. We had some issues where only Chad could hit this issue. Chad is like one of our designers, and he was having this issue very consistently where he wouldn't be able to record, and it was only on a single browser, only on Arc, not on Chrome, not on anything else. And
love those kind of issues.
Yeah. And only Chad and like maybe one user in Australia could reproduce it. And it was just super weird. We worked with him, like Justin and I paired with him, like in separate sessions, probably like 3 hours in total, just like going through debugging it, like running through all these cases.
Yeah.
And it finally turned out it was actually, you have like a list of basically like media formats that you can record through browser APIs, and you can use different audio and video encoders for those media formats. And Chad's browser was saying, like this encoder and media format combo is supported, and it would try and record with that combo, and then it would just fail. And so basically, we think it was an encoder bug where something was wrong with this encoder. and the browser was saying like if you queried it, it would say it was supported, and then it would just crash, like it would just break. And when we fixed that bug, another bug came up on Firefox where if you tried to stop the recording, you couldn't stop it at all. And so Firefox also had the same issue, and we just had to use the default encoder on Firefox and specify another recorder if it wasn't Firefox. And just kind of like a little bit of a mess of like AV issues.
Yeah,
But,
just real browser shenanigans like in the old Internet Explorer days. But yeah, it was just crazy. It was crazy because the browser is telling you, yes, I support this format, and then when you use it, it dies.
Right.
Like, what can you do about that? Like, you can't check to see if it will be supported because you checked already and it said yes. But yeah, real browser shenanigans. That's my label for that.
It makes it feel so hacky, but it's like, what's the best solution in that scenario? I don't know.
Welcome to the web, everybody.
All right. Thanks again.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See ya.
See you guys.
Bye.